Bro, you know who I really like is Dave Ramsey.
Mm-hmm.
And I was listening to him yesterday, and he said something so interesting about finance and wealth.
A YouTube clip or like a full podcast?
Instagram.
Okay.
So he does have a great podcast, but I was listening to a reel that was a clip that I believe was from one of his podcasts. And he said something so interesting about wealth and about finance over the long term. He said from his own experience working with many, many, many people, he's like, there is no question there's a clearly direct relationship between how long you're planning ahead and how much money you have. And so he said this, he said, the people who are planning for next weekend all the time, who are planning for Friday, Saturday, Sunday, they just, without question, on a general basis, have less money than people who are planning like a year, 3 years, 5 years ahead. He was like, when you live for the weekend and the extent of your forward thinking is what's going on this weekend, you're going to be spending more money, you're going to be wasting money, you're going to be buying things you don't need. But when your forward thinking and planning goes, well, what about a year from now, 5 years from now, 10 years from now, those people almost always have greater wealth and greater finances because they're not spending money on stupid shit. It's I thought that was a really good way to put it in terms of just practical thinking of, well, how far ahead are you planning? Are you planning till this Friday, or are you planning until 3 years from now? And sort of like with your accounting, it's 2 years. You were saving for those entire 2 years. So you could build up. Your planning was not for that coming weekend. Your planning was 2 years in advance or years in advance, so you could get enough savings to then comfortably leave and have some wiggle room. So that like fits in line perfectly with what he was saying, and I like him a lot.
I think I've told you before that the way you felt the first time you heard Dale Carnegie's book is exactly how I felt the first time I heard 3 Dave Ramsey clips. I was like, yeah, makes sense. Like, seems like common knowledge.
Common knowledge. Yeah.
No, that's really good. And the more you're thinking ahead, it's there's almost a degree of like sacrifice and trying to minimize impulsiveness to it too, giving up short-term pleasures for long-term deeper meaning or something that's more important to you. But it's difficult. Like after a long, stressful week, and if you're coping, or if you're like, form of enjoyment is going out and having a bunch of drinks and like whatever, it's hard to not do that. But by giving that up, you're going to benefit in the long term.
It's interesting. So I just sort of had this thought in my head. I think when people focus on short-term pleasures, they lose long-term stability. But when they focus on long-term stability, they might not have as many short-term pleasures, but they do have that longer-term stability and more freedom. So it's like either you're going to have more short-term pleasures, but that's going to lead to longer-term instability and being unsure of what's going to happen, what's going to come, what are you going to have available to you. But when you can sort of forego not necessarily all short-term pleasures, but when you can forego them more often, you create more long-term stability with yourself and your finances.